Semper Fi, mother.
In this episode, I'm talking about one of my favorite game series of all time, Doom. The series is a first-person shooter, or FPS for short. The first Doom was created in 1993 by John Romero and John Carmack. In Doom 1, as has become the standard for the Doom series, you play a space marine. This time, you're sent to Deimos, a moon of Mars, after scientists accidentally open a portal to Hell while researching interdimensional travel. As monsters pour through and either slaughter people or turn them into gun-toting zombies, your job is to close the portal and stop the invasion. You're taken to bases, waste management plants, and research facilities, all while battling imps, demons, also known as pinkies, cacodemons, and lost souls. These are all in addition to the sergeants and the privates that have all been turned into zombies as well, all trying to shoot you as you're going through these levels. Finally, you find the portal itself, which is guarded by two Barons of Hell, which are creatures you haven't fought yet. Wasteland Survivor presents Doom. 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 Thinking the only way to close the portal is to jump through the teleporter, you do so thinking you're going to stop the invasion, only to be met with a giant army of those creatures that you had been fighting. Inevitably, you die, and thinking that that's the end of the game, Episode 2 actually picks up on Phobos, which is the second moon of Mars. Their facilities are overrun as well, and it basically continues on and on with the same idea of grabbing new guns, shooting these enemies, and getting from one end of the level to the other while collecting some keys. And finally, in Episode 3, you enter basically Hell, where you have to stop the creatures once and for all from wreaking havoc on Mars and hopefully not Earth. Along the way, you find multiple weapons such as pistols, shotguns, chain guns, rocket launchers, and then also some unique weapons like the plasma rifle and the BFG 9000, which stands for Big Effing Gun 9000. Cryptic, I know. It shoots a massive green energy ball that hits everything in the room no matter where it lands, doing the most damage to the creature or creatures that it hits first. You also find suits of armor, armor pickups, elixirs of health, supercharged spheres, these blue things that actually give you plenty of health over 100%. You also can find invisibility spheres, backpacks, glasses that let you see in the dark, and so on. You'll need these items and weapons because on every corner there is something trying to kill you. Usually there are multiple things trying to kill you, and when you try to pick up these items or weapons or things like that, what are called monster closets open, and suddenly the room is filled with horror. Once you've killed the spider mastermind, and my favorite, the cyber demon, you find yourself at the end of Hell feeling accomplished that you've defeated the hordes. However, there's a problem. While you were fighting Hell in Hell, Hell came to Earth. And that's when Doom 2 picks up, with you heading back to Earth to save it before the whole planet is overrun. New soundtracks, enemies, and weapons, as well as items, make their appearance in Doom 2. For example, the fan favorite, the Super Shotgun, makes its first appearance. The Super Shotgun is a double-barreled powerhouse capable of obliterating most lower-tier enemies in one, maybe two hits. Then there are the new enemies, the Pain Elemental, which shoots lost souls out of its mouth like they're going out of style, the Revenant, a skeletal warrior with homing rockets and punches galore, the Archvile, capable of resurrecting every enemy around you while sending fire up your bum, the Mancubus, a fat, gross demon with twin fireball launchers, the Arachnotron, which is a miniature version of the Spider Mastermind, except it has plasma rifles instead of chain guns, and my personal opposite of favorite, the Chain Gunner, who apparently has an automatic sniper rifle capable of hitting you from 500 yards away while you can't even see him. Hate you! The environments here are more terrestrial, being that you're on Earth. For example, you have sewers, factories, and even a downtown area, and other places like tenements. It feels a little more akin to Doom 1's episode, with human environments and structures as opposed to what you see in the later episodes. But there are also nonsensical levels that kind of make no sense and pop up out of nowhere. For example, the Crusher, which just has a giant block crushing random things for no apparent reason. Gotcha, which is later on in the game, but also seems a little bit out of place and random. Tricks and Traps, which is literally tricks and traps. Every single lever brings you somewhere and is trying to mess with your head more than actually lead you from one place to the other. And let's not forget Barrels of Fun, which is literally just thousands of barrels that you can shoot to destroy enemies and also yourself. Levels seem to come out of nowhere and be a little out of place, especially when some other levels are trying to tell a story. And keep in mind, when I say story, I don't mean that there are many characters or really plot points. It really is just run and gun from one end to the other. But there is a bit of environmental storytelling when it goes from human-made structures and concrete, metal, and things like that. And then later on, as you go through the episodes or you go through the game, you start to see the transformation where things are starting to look some human and some from hell. However, I do find that some of the levels and the structure and overall design really was trying to tell a little bit of a story where you're clearly going from one section of this place on Earth to another section of this place on Earth. But then when you go to those random levels, it does seem like that's all they are, just random levels. However, it is clear that in Doom 2, John Romero and John Carmack, as well as their team, tried to have a little bit more fun and be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek as opposed to being just a horror sci-fi run-and-gun shooter. I almost feel like those levels are breaking the fourth wall in their approach. The last third of the game is truly hellish as you start to venture further and further into Hell's main controlled areas. Flesh walls, eyes for triggers, and bones everywhere. Not to mention the intestines that scroll by on the wall, and other things that look a little bit more like they took it from a human and sewed it together. At the end, you fight the Icon of Sin, basically a demon that takes up an entire wall, is invincible, and the only way to hurt him or kill him is to shoot a rocket into a tiny rectangle at the top of his forehead. It's this demon whose very mind has been spawning the creatures you've been fighting for the past 2 games. Once he's destroyed, you have finally won. The final text screen scrolls by. You saved Earth and the survivors, closed the portal, and kicked out the baddies. Now what's left? To just sit back and revel in your accomplishments. Until the next game, that is. Now these games are very near and dear to my heart. When I was a kid, I remember playing them both on the PC and on Super Nintendo when it came out. Anyone remember the red cartridge? It's a fantastically atmospheric game to play, especially for the time, which, as you can see in the images and video, is very pixelated and basic. The soundtrack is amazing too, moving from pounding metal to subtle horror. A lot of these tracks are also based on real songs from the 90s, Master of Puppets, Them Bones, Angry Chair, and so on. The biomechanical nature of these creatures is actually prevalent throughout as well. A lot of these creatures are flesh and bone only, such as the Imp and the Cacodemon. But as you get further and further into Hell, you see enemies that are combinations of heavy tech and organic bodies. The Mancubus, for example, with its corpulent, disgusting body, is fitted with flame launchers instead of hands. The Arachnotron and its mommy spider mastermind are part fleshy monster and part steel body. And again, my personal fave, the Spider Demon, is literally half and half. One metal leg, one organic leg. One rocket launcher for an arm, one regular arm. It's almost as if they were hoarding our technology and using it to slowly upgrade themselves so that when they launched an invasion, the scientists and Marines would be unknowingly outmatched. It's also very H.R. Geiger, who, if you don't know who that is, he's an artist whose creations actually served as the basis for the Alien franchise's signature aliens. He also had a penchant for combining metal with organic bodies. And a lot of times, his art did sort of border or be directly sexually based. So the atmospheric storytelling is, well, pretty much all you get in the way of storytelling in this series, with the exception of a couple of text screens between the episodes and certain sections of Doom 2. There are no notes, terminal records, files, or any real way to know what has happened to any other characters, or I should say, would-be characters, in this series. It's literally you versus the Horde. Now, in comparison with Doom and Doom Eternal, if you've played those, that has a little bit more story and actual conversations. There are actual characters that you meet throughout the story. No, this is just you running down human-made halls, shooting tons and tons of bad guys until you get to the more fleshy, weird hell areas to defeat the final boss. Overall, I think this game does horror sci-fi really well, albeit a very basic formula. You're just collecting power-ups, items, and keys from A and going to B, and you're unlocking the door to go to the next level. There really isn't a lot there for you to look at in between. For this writing focus, I want to discuss the importance of what I call creative assets in your sci-fi and even in your fantasy novels. Now, granted, I just mentioned that Doom is really a game that's very light on story, if there's really any story to be had at all, aside from those text screens that I mentioned earlier. It relies more on environmental hazards, scenery, run-and-gun gameplay, and picking up that new item or weapon that you really want to try out on the bad guys. When writing a scene in general to build up tension or mystery, it's essential to have those environmental descriptions to talk about what's already happened or what's about to happen. If someone's been killed, for example, position of the body, the state of the room, the blood splatter on the wall are all going to be things that will paint a picture for the reader in their mind. Now, in my series, there's not as much mystery as there is suspense in my novels, where the characters are going to encounter a new issue or a new hazard, possibly a new enemy. Also, another thing I think is true of sci-fi and fantasy alike is when main characters discover a new piece of tech or weaponry, armor sets, or items, it really kind of drives that imagination for the reader to discover those things alongside those characters. A new piece of armor or tech is something that catches the viewer's eye, or in this case, the reader's imagination. In Doom's case, aside from shotguns and chain guns, there's also the plasma rifle and the aforementioned BFG 9000. Power-ups like the Soul Sphere and the Invulnerability Sphere actually add a mini mission of their own to discover and use. In my series so far, I've created and shown a few pieces of tech and items that I think that the reader will find intriguing. The pinnacles are these massive towers that not only provide sustainable, renewable energy, but also serve as interdimensional portals for the characters to explore. The pinnacles are powered by ormium spheres at the very top, and ormium is one of the two minerals that I created in my series. Ormium is a mineral that really is able to hold massive amounts of energy and store it for long periods of time. Plasmium, on the other hand, is another mineral that the residents of this planet have discovered is a way for them to birth AI into. The AI can then grow exponentially and expand as far as it can up until the walls of that plasmium core. Now, something people may or may not have figured out in my series is that the cores are specifically cut to certain geometric shapes depending on the intelligence level of that AI. So, for example, some of the simpler servos and basic bots that you're going to encounter might have a cubic shape, while others will have hexagonal spheres, octagonal spheres, and the level of intelligence is directly correlated to the number of sides cut into the plasmium core. The Gons, as I mentioned in my Fallout 3 video, also check that out when you have a second, were also intentionally created to have some kind of unique fauna that the reader can discover. The other being crabweed, which is a flora, and it has kind of a mind of its own whenever you get close to it. One thing I'm going to go into greater detail in Novel 2 is ignition orbs. These ignition orbs serve as tiny ormium spheres that would reignite the pinnacles if there was ever an emergency blackout or something went drastically wrong with the pinnacle itself. Now, these spheres can be taken from place to place, and they're being hidden in certain bunkers and sections of the country. One or more of these characters will be searching for these ignition orbs in a quest to rebuild civilization. Now, a word of caution that I think was important as I was writing. There was a time where I was trying to create something unique and special about every single aspect of the world. But what I felt would happen is things started to actually feel foreign and alienating because the readers might not have had a comparative symbol for them to really grasp onto. And what I find is that if you try too hard to make every single aspect of your sci-fi or fantasy story unique, Sometimes what might happen is, and I've talked about this in another video about over-description, I think it gets a little bit too muddy. These landscapes, objects, items, weapons, they shouldn't really be everything about your story. They should serve as vehicles to help make things maybe more unique and engaging. But at the end of the day, and this is something that I've spoken about with my editor, Luis Hare, who is great, it doesn't matter whether you put your story on Mars or a moon of Mars. What really matters is the human interaction and things that go on between the people. These objects and items just serve as something that maybe is a little bit more intriguing and engaging to create more of a unique world. So what do you think of objects and stories? Are too many alienating? Or do you find it's the more the merrier type of approach? Let me know in the comments. And while you're at it, check out my novel series, A Spark in the Ashes, with book 1 in all minor and major outlets. And keep an eye out for book 2. Let's just hope that Doom Marine is keeping an eye out for us in case hell ever invades Earth again.